Welcome to the Wandering Tangent podcast. I'm BJ, with me is Jeff. Today we're talking about the 1954 Japanese classic sci-fi monster movie, whatever you want to call it, the original Godzilla.
Okay, BJ, you are the best Godzilla fan that I know. So what did you think of this very first film featuring Godzilla?
So may I make a little bit of a confession?
Okay.
I have pitched myself here, and you have known me as a Godzilla fan for quite some time. Would you believe this is actually the first time I have sat down and watched the original Japanese version?
Kind of, well, no, but now that I think about it, perhaps because this movie is a little different than the other Godzilla movies.
It is quite different.
Yeah.
So for so for a little bit behind the scenes for the ones of viewers at home.
The
So we
ones of
are
viewers.
the ones of you.
Yeah,
It's like
there's so many people out there.
the
Yeah.
handful of viewers, whatever you want to call it. It's like I can't say dozens because we don't have dozens. The single digit number of viewers out there. This is our New Year's episode. Happy New Year's, by the way. We are actually recording this in early October, and this is the movie we're reviewing right after we talked about The Changeling. So we just had a couple of happy-go-lucky movies to talk about in a row, didn't we?
Yeah, The Changeling was quite something. Yeah, scary movies, well, especially that one. It was fun. I actually had a lot more fun than I thought I would have because I'm not big into horror, as I keep on saying, but The Changeling was kind of fun. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a different kind of horror than what a lot of people think of nowadays. But
yeah.
but now but now we're not even like 3 minutes of this recording. We're already tangenting. So let's back on track. Back on track. Come on.
The question was, what did you think of it? And I am very surprised that you said that you've never really seen this one. So this is going to be a really fresh perspective from you.
I mean, I don't know if it's gonna be that fresh because I have seen the American version on multiple occasions, and this one more or less hits the same notes. There's a few things the American version, or I guess the English version, international version, whatever you want to call it, kind of glosses over as compared to the original Japanese version.
yeah,
But
yeah, I had seen the American version too. And now that I've seen the Japanese version, I almost think the Japanese version will ruin the American version for you. So once you see it, it's
what do
like going back is hard now. Because when I actually did this, I watched the American version today, and the whole time I kept thinking, oh, well, they just kind of spliced this out and had a few stand-ins from the characters, and I kept thinking about how they were able to take these scenes, these new Americanized scenes, from the 1954 version. And so, and plus the 1954 version, the Japanese version, has a more storyline, and they go a little more in depth with the characters and the dialogue. So,
oh,
yeah. But it does have Perry Mason in it, though. So I'm torn, because
that's
I really like any scene with Perry Mason in it.
that's about the one thing the Americanized version has going for it after watching both versions.
Yeah.
Because if you just watch the American version, I guess they kind of touch on the love triangle between Ogata, what's the girl's name, Emiko, and
Emiko.
Serizawa, but it's a much bigger force in the Japanese version, and also there's this little subplot of Ogata and Emiko trying to find the right moment to kind of spring it on everyone that she doesn't, because poor
Yeah.
Zurasawa gets like bro zoned right out of the gate. She's like, oh, he's like an older brother to me. It's like, ouch.
I know, she keeps trying to tell him, but he's kind of into his research, and they keep
So
getting distracted.
I guess it might be more of a spoiler thing, even though I guess
Yeah, that was
at
totally
this
spoilers, not
I get
not
well
appropriate.
at this point it is like a 70-year-old movie, so I don't know. Like I think we're past the spoiler threshold, but I know you
Well,
like to separate the two.
let's dial it back here. So,
Okay.
your point of view, was this, let's put it this way. Do you recommend that people watch the Japanese version of this movie, or do you prefer that they watch the American version, or just never watch it because it's too much? Which one?
I would. I mean, obviously not everyone is gonna like watching a movie with subtitles. That's what holds back a lot of people. So The upside of the American version is that if you don't like subtitles, basically instead of subtitles, you get what's the actor's name? Raymond Burr, the guy that plays Perry Mason.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah,
It,
Perry
in-
Mason, whatever his name
instead
is. I only know
instead
him
of
as Perry
subtitles.
Mason.
Instead of subtitles, you get Raymond Burr kind of narrating everything instead.
Yeah,
But if you're okay with watching a movie with subtitles, the original Japanese version has a lot more going for it, I think.
I completely agree.
It's it's the same story, it's more or less the same movie, but the shoehorning in the American character to give a Western point of view kind of glosses over a lot of the subtleties of the plot.
It does. You get a bit more in the Japanese version. And the dialogue is different. They use the same scenes, but they actually change the dialogue in the scenes. So, it, but anyway, I don't have to go into specifics right now, but yeah, the Japanese version is probably better if you like foreign films and you want to see the more in-depth version. It's definitely that. And though, like for me, watching the American version now, all I can do is just recognize the 1954 Japanese version. Like I see that one in every scene.
I
Yeah.
mean, this might be more spoiler things, so maybe I
Yeah.
won't get into it just yet.
Okay, so you recommend it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I know watching a movie with subtitles ain't for everyone, but if you can do it, if you get the choice between watching the Americanized version or the original Japanese, I'd say give the original Japanese a crack.
Yeah, absolutely. My opinion's the same. So, should we go on to spoilers?
Might as well.
Spoilers? All right. We are now in
we
spoiler territory.
we already did, so
We already fell into it. Okay.
So kind of like what I was gonna say is that in the American version they like basically cut out an entire character because there's like the kid whose family gets wiped out on the island and he hangs around for a while. In like the American version, he just kind of is a character that screams as his house gets destroyed and he disappears.
Like, yeah, he runs outside because he has to go and see Godzilla attacking. And then he screams when he sees him. Yep, interesting. I kind of feel for Godzilla a little bit. I mean, when he's walking through these towns and he's like stepping on things, I feel like when I'm walking late at night through my kid's room and there's toys on the floor and I can barely see because it's dark and I have to put them on their bed, and every time you step, there's always these sharp edges of toys and stuff. It's probably something like that for Godzilla. He's just going through and it's like, another train car right in the foot. And
Once again, I find myself just wishing we had a way to do this in person because just the look I'm giving my computer monitor right now is just interesting.
Yeah.
This is a monster that shrugs off tank shells and rockets and in this movie they probably think a nuke can kill him, but he probably hurts stepping on Legos.
Well, yeah, but like stepping on a fire hydrant, that would be not fun. Okay, so I guess he's somehow reinforced by the H-bomb. The H-bomb radiation made him super strong.
Do you think he doesn't like? Do you think he doesn't like have like scales on the bottom of his feet? Do you think it's?
I don't know.
Do you think like the bottom of his foot is like his Achilles heel? It's like the missing scale for Smaug in The Hobbit. It's like, oh, if we shoot him in the feet.
It probably is. It's
the one
probably
thing
like
they never try in the Godzilla movies. Like, oh, just get him to step on some Legos and he'll go away.
When he's walking across land, it's almost like he's taking his shoes off and he's walking on asphalt. And there's little tiny rocks and pebbles. And he's like, ow, ow. I don't know. He does move slowly. Maybe that's the whole reason why he moves slowly across. He normally could just like trot or walk quickly or sprint even. But no, I don't know. Maybe he needs shoes of some kind.
One of the most important. Well, I always cringe when people say that movies aren't important, but one of the most notable, most memorable monster movies of all times. A movie with this deep message. And what do we start with? Oh, Godzilla's feet probably hurt.
All those explosions and stuff as he's walking around. Yeah, but he doesn't seem to be hurt by all those cannons that go off. Yeah, I almost think that the other movies make more sense after you watch the Godzilla movies because they always get all these cannons and battleships and airplanes to fight off Godzilla. None of it does any good. So it's obvious the only way to defeat Godzilla or even stand a chance against him is just to get another big monster and put that monster in his way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it so much makes sense now in these movies. So much.
yeah, and so kind of pulling back the curtain again. So Jeff wanted to watch a Godzilla movie again, so I'm like, you know what? Let's watch the first one first, because we did kind of start in the middle of the series, and depending on how many more Godzilla movies we end up watching, if we go into like the later eras, like the ones made in the 80s or the ones made around 2000, a lot of those tend to set themselves up as direct sequels to this one, kind of ignoring a lot of the other movies that happened during the 60s and 70s.
Really?
Because
Yeah, I haven't seen most of those. So it's almost
yeah,
like they ignore all of those monster fights. And
more or less, yeah,
yeah, he's just a creature that comes out of the deep ocean and will destroy things on land and then goes back.
yeah. Because like ones made in the ones made in the 80s and 90s, Godzilla 19, I think it was called Godzilla 1985 in the States. I think it was 84 in Japan. That's treated as a direct sequel to what we're talking about now, the original Godzilla.
Okay.
And then all those movies during that era are a series. But then during the ones made in the 2000s, a couple of them are related, but most of them are sort of standalones, and most of them are set up as direct sequels to the original one.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
So I figured if we are gonna watch Godzilla movies on a semi-regular basis, we should watch the original first, since that's the inspiration for a lot of the other ones.
I think that's smart. It's really good to start with this movie.
And it also kind of shows how quickly and how radically it changed, because you have this movie, and then the third movie in the series is King Kong versus Godzilla, which is just insanely different in tone.
Yeah. Yep. Just as and I love that it's almost interesting that we went in that order. We watched the fun monster fighting one, and then we went back to what Godzilla was supposed to be in the beginning, which is a horror destruction cataclysmic destruction movie. And this movie took place 9 years after the end of World War II.
Hmm.
And a lot of people seem to point that out. Japan culturally, from what I can get, this movie has a lot of dark tones on it. But I mean, their country went through a enormously dark chapter in history. So I don't know. I don't know if you really put too many parallels there, because a lot of
Oh, you definitely do. I mean, Godzilla is an allegory on the atomic bomb, and it's the H bomb is something that comes up, I won't say pretty often in the plot, but it's definitely mentioned, because Zarazawa is afraid to sort of unveil the auction destroyer, because he's afraid it's going to become the new nuclear weapon.
yeah, yeah, and he decides to destroy his research. And also in the twist ending as well. Yeah, and all that happens. It's the whole idea of like self-sacrifice and doing something for the good of society over yourself, which I think is in Japanese culture a lot. I'm not a huge expert, but
I can't say him either, but
yeah, he definitely like sacrificed himself for the good of everyone.
yeah, he
But it was kind of I don't know. It's kind of like did he really have to stay under the water? He didn't have to. He could have escaped, right? This is
he
him
could
destroying his own knowledge to prevent anyone from coercing him into redoing his research.
Yeah, as part of the conversation when Ogata and Emiko sort of convince him to use the oxygen destroyer on Godzilla, he mentions that one of the things he's concerned about is that even if he burns all his notes, he still has the knowledge of the oxygen destroyer, and that if he gets talked into using it once, he's not sure he can be coerced into having to use it again. So at the end of the movie, instead of sort of, how do I phrase this? So at the end of the movie, instead of having to live with the knowledge or sort of to to keep this power, to keep this weapon from ever being used again, he's already destroyed all his notes, so the only other place the only other way to create the oxygen destroyer is from him. So he stays underwater and sacrifices himself to keep that from happening.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Uh, well, would the oxygen destroyer even hurt him? Because it only destroys oxygen, right? And if he was wearing a suit, wouldn't that reaction not be able to get inside the suit?
Well, he also cut his airline.
Oh, so yeah, no help there. Huh. Well, yeah, it has that. It does have kind of a sad ending like that, but I'm kind of torn about the ending. On one hand, like he is very much taking away this technology that can't that will probably fall into the wrong hands, but I don't know. I don't know. Interesting thing. I think that he's obviously a brilliant scientist and he could have gone on to do other kinds of research. Difficult thing. But he made his choice, I guess.
So, kind of segueing into that, we did watch the original Thing movie about a year ago, back when we first kind of started prototyping this podcast, and there was kind of a similar discussion in that movie about about danger of the danger of having the knowledge out there and not having the knowledge to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall that, or has that exited your mind? Because that was over a year ago.
It sounds familiar. You're going to have to go into it again, though.
Okay, so spoilers for the 1950s version of the Thing. So there's the doctor in the Thing, and he starts growing the plants from the seeds he finds in the Thing's arm. Is this ringing
Yeah,
any bells?
he takes some sort of something off the creature and puts it into a garden, a little tiny garden, and they start to grow because it's a plant monster.
Yeah. So
It's a weird movie.
I like the movie too, but maybe we'll talk about it again someday. But so it's sort of the same discussion of team scientists against the troops there who are more concerned about the danger the science poses. So in this case, are you more on the side of letting the knowledge be out there for good or ill, or are you more
You know,
the
that's a good
downsides are
question.
too high?
Okay, I have a whole lot of. How can I not talk too much at this point? Because I have a lot to say about it, but I will summarize. In general, I think that what we learn is that there's a lot of science that you really can't keep out of the mainstream. So when things get discovered, they just kind of happen everywhere. It doesn't take long before someone else follows the same path and rediscovers it. So I honestly think that in this talking about this movie, what probably would happen is that he would get rid of all his research, the oxygen destroyer would be gone, and then 2 years would go by and some scientist in another country will go, hey, if he could do it, I wonder if we can. And they'll invest all sorts of resources into researching it again, and they'll probably find a way. Because if one scientist in a lab can find it, 100 scientists with more funding probably can find it again. So I don't think that it's possible. I don't think you can discover something and then erase it. Maybe to some extent you can, but as soon as people know that it's possible to create something like that, they're going to pursue that goal. So is there technology though that's too advanced for humanity and we don't have the moral character necessary to use it correctly? I think absolutely yes. I think
So now we're
yeah.
now we're rounding rounding back to sort of the crux of Forbidden Planet. That's the one. Couldn't
Yeah,
remember the name for a hot
this
second.
we keep running into the same themes, BJ, from all these movies. Yeah, so yeah, that movie had the same thing, and I think that morality and scientific tech and discovery kind of need to advance at the same time. I don't think you can have one without the other. So, or this is me in my basement philosophy course, because there's a lot I don't know. But what makes sense to me is that if you're going to have a society advance further in technology, you also need them to advance in morality too, so that they can make good decisions about it. And the two need to go together. And if they don't, then the technology can get out of hand. in many different ways. So, but it's kind of a difficult thing because science is progressing, and I don't think you can really go back very easily because as one group of people discover things, other people are going to follow their research, and I don't think there's any breaks on the process. But that's my humble little opinion. I mean, what do you think, PJ?
I mean, in the context of the movie, I suppose it kind of depends on how much is known, because I'm trying to remember the ending when they're on the boat getting ready to have Okada and Serizawa dive. They do have the press there, and they're talking about the doctor. I forget if they say what the invention is, or if they just talk about, or they just kind of mention in general. So I guess with what you're saying as to, oh, someone just research it, it would kind of depend on how far what it was spread. If it was just among like the four people, 5 people, however many people.
I don't know. I think that even just the sheer fact that it's going to be published in a newspaper saying, hey, Godzilla was defeated by an oxygen destroyer under the ocean. That's probably enough that in 10, 20 years, somebody's going to have it again. Because,
Oh, I mean,
but maybe they keep the whole thing secret. Maybe they just leave it mysterious as to how Godzilla was destroyed, and they could maybe cover it up, but I don't know.
yeah, that was kind of my whole thing. It's I forget if the newscaster like out and out calls it the oxygen destroyer, or if they just mention it as the weapon or as Dr. Serizawa's invention or whatnot. So, but anyway, I don't know. I see what you're saying, but I also get why they did how they did in the movie, because I'm I'm not an expert, obviously. I'm not a historian, so I don't know if at the time the film was made, if any of the benefits of nuclear power had started to surface yet. Like, I don't know, like when like nuclear reactors for power started to be a thing or whatever. So at the time, in the Japanese mindset, I could totally see why they did what they did, because like the first application of nuclear power was, a bomb that was used on them.
Mm-hmm.
So I can totally see why in this setting, and not to generalize the mindset of like an entire population, mind you, but giving the setting and the time period, I can totally see why they kind of wrote the plot as they did, and sort of framed it as a noble sacrifice, despite the argument we're having right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, he obviously knew that his invention would cause too many problems. Yeah, and it's an emotional scene when he burns his research. He lays it down and it burns. And Emiko, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Emiko, she just like looks at it and she's so torn because on the one hand, she's really proud of all of his abilities and his hard work and how he's done so much to create this great research and to have all this discovery, but then to see it all burn away, but at the same time to do it for the right reason, it's just gut wrenching, and she just collapses
Yeah,
under it. It's a good scene. It's good.
Yeah, it's also a scene that doesn't really work in the American version. She just kind of sits down and cries for some reason. I feel like it doesn't really, the American version doesn't do enough to get across the fact that, this was his life's work.
Yeah, I agree. I think that scene is much better in the Japanese version. In the American version, there's a scene where the scientist, what is it, Zarakawa? Did I say that right? I don't know.
The guy that makes Oxygen Destroyer?
Yeah. Serizawa, thank you. Serizawa, there's a point where he just collapses, but it's a completely different line that he is collapsing over. And it's not really a collapse. He just grabs his hair and he bends over and he's just overcome in the moment. But they changed it in the American version where he's just upset. He's like, oh, but I've got to stop Godzilla. But in the other one, he's just mourning over the fact that he wishes he never would have created such a thing. And yeah, anyway, it's much better in the Japanese one.
Agreed.
Yeah, there's another part though that I saw in that very same scene where he says, when I discovered it, I might have been happy at first, but then I was just overcome with dread because I knew how terrible of a weapon it could become. And so I didn't eat for 3 days. And I just thought That's a thing that people do. Like they get distraught and they stop eating. With me, I get upset and it's like, well, 6 donuts later and 2 pizzas. I was back to my senses again. And I continued on.
Well,
It's just like,
people handle stress in different ways.
yeah. I've never understood like I'm stressed so I don't eat for a while. I don't know. Maybe I've just lived a cushy life.
I think it depends on the kind of stress. I've been stressed enough that I've lost my appetite, and I've also I feel like if it's like long term. Well, I'm not a psychologist. Let's
I know.
throw out that disclaimer there, shall we? So, we are not trained medical professionals. Do not take any advice from us, please and thank you.
Yeah, even movie advice is a little questionable. Go ahead.
What do you mean? Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Anyway,
Was I saying something?
I don't know. You said.
Huh?
I thought. Okay. Thought.
Oh, no.
Okay. So yeah. Well, I was going to say like I get. Oh, what was I going to say? I don't know. That's an example of a tangent that just like gets electrocuted and falls over.
And just trains drilling everywhere, just like trains in every giant monster movie ever. Because this one, the train gets wrecked. It's been so long since I've watched original King Kong. Doesn't King Kong like wreck a train too?
I don't know.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But anyway, just don't use public transportation when the giant monster's attacking. It's just no good.
That's true.
Okay, so now that we totally derailed the deep conversation we were having.
Yeah. It's retribution. It's karma for having a deep conversation. Now we have no idea what our conclusion was. So now that we're in spoiler section, what is your conclusion for this movie? Or not conclusion, but what do you think of this movie as far as like if you compare this to let me rephrase my question. If you compare this to the other Godzilla movies, how do you think it's different?
Pretty much the only Godzilla movie that's kind of like it, that has well, not the only one, I should say. So the vast majority of Godzilla movies, shall we say, do not share the tone of this movie.
Yeah.
There's a handful that do. You could argue that the second movie, Godzilla Raids Again, has the same serious tone. The newest Japanese one, Shin Godzilla, has a very similar tone, and much like this one, has sort of a political message. And I guess that's one of the things I liked about this one, is that it shows how to phrase this. You can have a movie with a message and not make it a message movie. You know what I mean?
That's a really good point.
I feel like, it's probably been the same throughout history, but a lot of people tend to forget that in order to get across your message in the movie also has to be good.
Well, and if you make the movie too much about the message, I think it just kind of like, it becomes too much of the focus. It's better to make it subtle, because then people are drawn into the movie first, and then they encounter the message. And I think that has a greater effect on the audience, personally, as I see it.
Well, I don't know if I would call the... Oh, maybe I could see more, because I basically knew what the parallels were going in. So I guess I should turn this back around on you. Did you know about the fact that this movie was sort of a commentary on nuclear weapons prior to watching it?
I had heard that, but I don't think I really looked extensively into that kind of interpretation.
So
I think it's pretty obvious in some ways, because they have people with burn marks, and they have all that destruction, and just like a leveled city. There's a lot of things in here that do parallel that kind of thing.
So as someone coming in with a mostly fresh point of view, you didn't feel like they were ham-fisted about the message?
I don't think the message is ham-fisted. I don't know what the term ham-fisted really means, but I'm pretty sure I'd say no to that question.
You
ham
didn't feel
fist
like,
to the face.
oh, ham-fisted, it's heavy-handed. They kind of beat you over the head with it, that sort of thing.
No, I don't think that it's that severe. It's there, but not every scene is like that. And no, disaster movies can be very popular because people. It goes back to the discussion we had last time about horror movies. Why do people watch things that are awful in movies? And I think we don't fully know, but we know that like we have dreams that are sometimes bad dreams. I think our mind sometimes wants to experience something unpleasant, and there's something that we probably learn from all that, probably. So like a disaster movie like this, it has a theme of the dangers of mass destruction. It has all of that in parallels to all of the super weapons of the time that still exist. But I think there's just also a general theme of destruction is coming and what can you really do to stop it? And everyone in the movie, all these people, they're just powerless. There's this giant creature that's just over the hillside and they see it and they just have to run with their little feet as it comes closer with its big feet. I think it's just all of that being in a state of just being outmatched. I think people are drawn to that kind of thing in entertainment with at least some movies because I think it's just a something that we like to have our minds go through in our entertainment.
Like now you mention it, like disaster movies is kind of a really weird genre because
It is. Yeah.
I don't I don't know if it's like marketed as a disaster movie, but I guess one of the more well-known modern examples would be like what's it called? Independence Day.
Yeah.
And it's a movie that people are like, oh, it's a fun movie, it's a popcorn flick. Yay, the humans win in the end, but like millions of people die in that movie, if
Yeah.
not billions.
Yeah. And when Independence Day came out, I loved the movie and I liked disaster movies. I don't think I like them as much anymore now that I'm old and boring. I just think, wow, that's a lot of that's a lot of cleanup. Who's
It's
gonna
like now you
clean up
stop
all
and
this
think.
mess?
It's like, I mean, I guess in something like Independence Day, it's set up more as a spectacle, whereas in Godzilla, it's more of a destruction on like on a human scale. Like there's the scene where, oh, this is a dark movie. There's the scene where there's the mother and her two children who are caught outside during Godzilla's attack, and she basically comforts her children in their last moments by saying that they're going to be they're going to be they're going to be in the same place their daddy is, kind of implying that their dad's already dead.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly that scene because that stood out to me too. I'm like, wow, talk about gut wrenching.
Very, very not in the American version.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, so we go through this movie, which is dark and destructive and where Godzilla truly is the villain. And then we go to the next movies where it's like a giant wrestling match.
I,
And it's
I was
just a
gonna say,
comical
and
fight between giant monsters.
I was gonna say, and literally 2 movies later, they're getting King Kong drunk.
Yeah, they're getting, yep, they're getting him drunk so they can transport him across the ocean because they need better ratings for their TV network. Of course, something like that.
I mean, I guess you could argue that was supposed to be like a social commentary as well, but I'm like, man, like our tangents are wild, but like like how do you go from Godzilla to King Kong versus Godzilla in like a movie?
I think movies do this. There's a pattern here, and a lot of movies follow it. A movie will come out, and the people who made it will have a very specific tone and theme to it, but there's something cool about it that everyone wants more of. And so they'll come up with a few sequels because the studio will make them do it. And the sequels will be very different. They'll be all about the one thing the audience wanted more of. And this is one of the examples I would point out for this is Rambo. The Rambo movies, the very first Rambo movie was all about Rambo being this person who had all of this, you could say, all of these difficult feelings from his experiences, and he couldn't find a place in the world that would accept him, and everything fell apart when he was triggered by all these experiences after he was in jail. And so there is action in the movie, but not like as much as the other movies. So when they made the sequels, they changed it. They made it a lot more about the action.
No, yeah, I mean, I've not, I think I've only ever seen like maybe one or two Rambo movies, and neither of them were First Blood. But I have watched like the, I have watched like the ending scene on YouTube where like Rambo like has like a mental breakdown finally because he's just being overwhelmed by like his memories and his PTSD, and then like every other Rambo movie after is him just like blowing people apart.
Yeah.
It's like him mowing people down and just being like a killing machine. It's like, yeah, it's wild how.
Yeah, the first movie had a very different message to it. There was a message about people and how they can find a place in the world and how they're broken after traumatic events. And it had that, but then after the first movie, it the studio knew what people wanted and they want to make money on the sequels, and so they changed it into what they needed it to be. And
Yeah.
I'm not, for Godzilla, I really like it. I like the first movie. I like the dark stuff, but once they get some extra monsters in, they have a brawl. It's kind of fun too. So I'm not against that pattern. I think that sometimes it can pay off into new interesting things, but I think it is a pattern. When you make sequels, usually the sequel is what they know the audience will love. And the first movie is the more adventurous one, where they're trying something out. And it just so happens that the audience really loves it, which means now you've got room for a sequel. You've got an audience ready to show up. So, yeah.
Yeah, I will admit, I was, as I sat down to watch this version for the first time, I was kind of trying to mentally map out why I had never sat down to watch it, and I guess it's kind of in the same vein, Usually when I'm in the mood for a Godzilla movie, I'm out for something more lighthearted and whatever, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and back to your earlier comment, now that you mentioned that you hadn't watched it all the way through, that makes sense, because this is a different tone altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about how, when we talked about King Kong versus Godzilla, we talked about how Godzilla gradually goes from like goes from a force of destruction to sort of a neutral protector to a straight up hero.
They do that with King Kong. Yeah, King Kong.
Yeah,
To some extent, they do. They make him more gentle sometimes in the later movies, the newer films. So he like has
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, like he's aggressive in one moment, and then he's gentle and kind in another. They go back and forth.
Oh, I feel like King Kong was always more of a sympathetic character than like original Godzilla.
Mm.
Because like even at the end of the original King Kong, like the last line was beauty that killed the beast, whereas so like even in like the original King Kong, Kong had some redeeming qualities, whereas in Godzilla he was just a straight up disaster. The one character, the doctor, wants to study him for scientific reasons and doesn't want it to die because of scientific reasons, but he doesn't like humanize Godzilla. He doesn't want Godzilla to not be killed because he feels bad about it, but because he'd be more valuable to study.
Yeah. I don't think I'm on his side on that subject, but I think there are some things that are way too dangerous.
Well,
so you can't study them.
Well, his argument was also that he didn't believe Godzilla could be killed anyway. So
yeah,
instead of antagonizing it, sort of study it to learn what they could, and
yeah, he says,
I suppose theoretically learn how to live with it.
Somehow. Well, and there's a line where he says, "Stop shining lights on him. You're making him more upset." Yeah, I don't know. Perhaps. Do you think all the cannons and the rockets actually made the situation worse? Hard to say. I mean, he's already approaching the city, and he already destroyed a town without ever being shot at. There was that town on that small island that he walked through and destroyed much of it. It's hard to say.
There's the scene with the jets where they kind of sort of imply that the jets drove him off, but he was also kind of leaving anyway. And
yeah.
And then the pyrotechnics launched from the little model jets actually actually hit the costume, though I suppose that was probably done for safety reasons, because
So you think those rockets didn't hit the costume on purpose to make the
I,
filming easier, because those rockets would have been dangerous.
well, I mean, come on, if you're the guy in the suit, you're in that suit. I think he's in the water at the time, so you're in the suit, you're in water. It's already hot in that suit. I'm sure it was hard to breathe. Do you really want to be hit with pyrotechnics?
They're not paying me enough for this. Yeah, that guy really must have been quite tough. Because yeah, it's a very hot suit. I agree. The pyrotechnics being shot at by that wouldn't have been great, but they already had some explosions. Like they had the cannons go off, so they must have like detonated something on his chest. I don't know.
Maybe. I
Maybe.
don't know. I
I really like the scene where he comes up over the hill, though. And yeah, it's not as cool as modern special effects, but the idea that the first time we see him close up is right when he kind of suddenly appears, just slowly coming over the hill. And everyone's running for cover. They think they're running to the safe area, but then he comes up right where they're going to, so they have to turn and run back.
well, I think the idea was that they're running towards it to see what was going on, because one thing I noticed is that like a lot of the characters they show are like carrying swords and stuff, like they're gonna go out to fight. Then it's like, oh crap, the sucker's 200
No.
feet tall.
The sword
let's
was
not
not
try
necessary.
this.
Let's go back. Yeah. Oh, there's something else I was going to say.
Train of thought successfully derailed once more.
Yep.
So while you're thinking, so a lot of the movies we watched, we've kind of made fun of the quote unquote romance, and as we mentioned in the American version, they just kind of it's mentioned in I suppose it's kind of mentioned in passing, but not really dived into as much detail. Do you feel like the relationship between the three main characters was kind of realistic,
Mm.
or how should I say? Did that dynamic like work for you?
Uh, honestly, I really had to watch this movie at least 2 or 3 times before I really picked up on the love triangle completely. It spells it out perfectly in the American version. Um, and again, like I don't follow Godzilla movies very well. I have to pay attention to them because I'm mostly just tuning things out until suddenly there's a miniaturized city that's being stepped on, because I really love those scenes. So I think that there's a lot of movies that have love triangles because it seems like you need to have that as a side story to make it more, I don't know, the audience just likes it. So I don't know. It's not I guess it's kind of helpful because it adds to the scientist's sacrifice. In a way, he's kind of like from Casablanca. He's like the Humphrey Bogart character from Casablanca, where he likes,
Would
but he
you
doesn't really love the girl. He doesn't get. It's not like he likes the girl, but he does sacrifice everything for her. He sacrifices his research and even himself for all of humanity, and then he says to the girl, like, go and be happy with this other guy, as he meets his demise under the ocean. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of like you give up everything for the girl, but I think he didn't just give up everything for her. I think he kind of sacrificed for everybody. But
I'm I'm sure it's a great parallel, but I've actually never seen Casablanca.
you've never seen Casablanca?
I've never seen Casablanca. It's been on my to watch list forever, but I've just never gotten around to watching it.
Everybody should see Casablanca.
Well,
Okay,
guess
99%
what?
of the population should see Casablanca. There might be
Well,
some cases out there where they probably, I don't know. It's a good movie.
well,
It's probably one of the best movies ever made.
well, get well, af well. No, yeah. By now, the Star Trek motion picture episode will have come out, so I can say this without fear of spoiling anything. After hearing your definition of what the best movies of all time should be, I'm not sure that's really a ringing endorsement from you.
I kind of spelled out my reasons why I liked Star Trek, the movie. I still think I'm right though. I know it's a huge argument, but I think that yeah, people often think they know what they want, but then they don't know what they want until they've lived a bit and then discovered what it is they want. And I think that is a lot of Star Trek, the motion picture. Plus, it's the idea that you can have everything you seem to want until you realize that in order to get more of what you want, you need to somehow get the perspective of another person. And that's like what V'ger's. Okay. Yeah, I did it. I talked about it. It just came out.
That and 25% of your movie being exceptionally shots makes the best movie of all time.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know. Maybe I was going to make a joke about how, well, since you're really here for the special effect shots, that's maybe why you always get lost in Godzilla movies, is because you're only here for the special effect shots. You're the only person I think you're the only person in the world that's like, yeah, the plot of King Kong vs. Godzilla was really confusing. I had to watch it a few times to get it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of more work for me. I like storylines, but I don't know. I think I've never, and this is where I actually am learning something, because I never appreciated Godzilla's storylines. I'm going to totally confess that. For the last forever, as I've once in a while watched a Godzilla movie, the storyline I've just kind of went, blah, whatever. Okay, now that train's going to get derailed somehow. It's been like that, but this time it's different. I'm actually trying to focus on the storyline and pay attention to each of the lines and keep track of everybody's motivation as they're doing stuff. Even Godzilla's motivation, which is exactly what my kids keep asking. Like, they still are like, why is he doing this? Why is he coming out of the water? Why does he live in Japan? It's like all these questions.
Well,
It's because of the giant undersea trench next to Japan. Because
if they want the
he just
whys
likes
and what
Japan.
fors, then if they want the whys and what fors, then at some point I should make you watch Giant Monsters Attack, because that goes real wild on Godzilla's motivation.
Does it? Well, we gotta watch that
it's
one.
Like I don't want to spoil it because it's amazing. It's also unironically one of my favorite Godzilla movies, so that's on the list at some point.
Now, that is an endorsement, an unironic favorite movie. Because
No.
an ironic favorite movie, that's easy. There's lots of those. But an unironic favorite movie, that is saying something.
Now to fit the parent theme of this episode, I had something I was going to say. Now I totally forgot what it was.
Oh, it was going to be important, right?
I don't know. I can't remember. Wait. I remember now. I remember now. Okay. So I think a lot of people are kind of the same way you are when it comes to Godzilla movies. So kind of advancing into the future here, or not really the future, the past, but they've been doing the American Godzilla reboots recently. There's first one 2014, King of the Monsters in 2018 or 19, and then King Kong versus Godzilla last year, or Godzilla versus King Kong last year. I'm used to saying it the other way now, but I'm probably in the minority in that I kind of like the 2014 version of Godzilla the best, because while it has the least giant monster action, I feel like it does a pretty good job of, not quite to the same extent that the original Godzilla does, obviously, but it does a good job of showing the story from the human angle, whereas in King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus King Kong, the human characters are there more or less as a vehicle to get the camera to where the next monster brawl is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen? I know I haven't made you watch them because
we're talking 2014, right?
Yeah, 2014.
Yeah, I've barely watched any movies that have come out in like the last 10 years. I think I just kind of switched off. About a decade ago, I was like, wait a minute, this is what Hollywood does? And I was like,
Well,
and so I still like old movies, but the new movies, it takes a lot to get me to like a new movie.
Well, also, you kind of stop being able to go out watch a movie when you start having kids.
Yeah, I became boring in so many different ways. Yeah. Anyway, so no, I don't know the 2014 one.
Okay, might have to inflict those on you at some point, though. Trying to think of a good order to do it in. But anyway,
Anyway.
what were we talking about?
All right. So, should we have our final conclusion? Or is there more you want to say?
Well, I mean, our train of thoughts are derailing left, right, and center. So if I did have anything to say, I already forgot.
You already forgot it anyway.
I think I hit the main points I was thinking about.
Well, you're going to have plenty more opportunities to talk about Godzilla because out of all the movies we review, we'll probably more than average review a Godzilla movie. Yeah, since
I mean, we're obviously gonna talk about Godzilla again, but this is one of the few opportunities to talk about Godzilla in this particular context of Godzilla.
That's true. Well, if you want a minute, you can think about it. We can always edit out a bunch of dead air.
I think I hit the main points I was thinking about going in. That this is a good example of having a movie with a message without being
too much only about the message.
Yeah, it's a movie with a message rather than a message movie.
Yep, well said. Yeah, I do like old films, and this is a good film, and I do think that if people can manage it, watch the Japanese version. Definitely. And my own experience, if you watch the Japanese version and enjoy it, you're probably not going to enjoy the American version as much.
Yeah,
but Perry Mason is good in it, though. But
I mean, the American version isn't bad. You know, dumb 5-year-old me then catch on the fact that anytime he talks to a character who's in the Japanese version, they just show the back of the character. They show the back of their heads.
Yeah, it's obvious watching it
catch
now.
Up on that. Watching it now, it's totally obvious. But you know, dumb 10-year-old me is like, "Wow, there's a Japanese version." Only took me another few decades to get around to watching it.
Yeah. Yep, I completely didn't notice any of that. But yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, definitely watch it. And it's weird that Godzilla dies in it, though. See, that was a complete and total shock for me when he died. I'm like, but there's another 55 movies after this. You can't die, Godzilla.
It's only 20-something.
So apparently, Godzilla dies. If you can add this into the whole canon, he dies. And then the next creature is actually another Godzilla.
I think so. It's been a while since I've watched Godzilla Raids again, and I can't remember if I've watched the original Japanese dub of that. I feel like I did, but I can't remember, so I don't know. Because I don't know if we want to get into this here, but like the Japanese version and the American version, that they had I think they had totally different titles for a while. In Japan, it was like Godzilla Raids Again, and in the States, it was Gigantus the Fire Monster. So, the American version,
Gigantus the Fire Monster.
Gigantus the Fire Monster, or something like that. So, the American version, wasn't even marketed originally as a Godzilla movie. I think I'd have to do more research into that before I can say that with any certainty. But yeah, like you said, Godzilla dies. They vaporize him.
Yeah, but then isn't there a movie later on where they go down in the ocean and they retrieve his bones, and then they make a mechanized Godzilla out of those bones?
Yeah. That's one of the... Is that Godzilla Against Godzilla? That's
Is that Mega Godzilla? Or is that something else?
So it depends on your Mecha Godzilla. So...
Because there's more than one, right? My goodness.
I mean, it depends on the era of the movie, because here we go. Because in the 1960s, 70s version, Mechagodzilla was made by aliens.
Okay.
And the one in the 80s and 90s, I think I've only seen Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2 once, so I think it was just a giant robot. But then in the 2000s, that's when they used the bones of the first Godzilla to make Mechagodzilla. Is Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS. Those are the only two movies made in the 2000s that are connected.
Okay.
One's a sequel to the other.
I think that's so funny. It's good. It's a good funny, but it's funny. Well, we need to get these bones from the ocean because they would be great for making a mechanized Godzilla.
Well, it's like I said at the very beginning. The reason why because it was your idea to watch a Godzilla movie. I'm like, okay, let's watch the first one first, because depending on how we jump around through the series, if we get in the ones made in 2000s, a lot of those will treat themselves as the sequel to the first one and kind of ignore all the ones that came before. So that's sort of why I said let's watch this one first when you said you want to watch a Godzilla movie.
Mm.
And that's the other thing, is that Jeff here says, oh, we watch these because of BJ. He's suggested both of them so far.
It's true. It's true.
I think he's just trying to keep me happy or something. I don't know.
I'm fascinated by it all. I am. But I think I will be more entertained once we get into the big monster fights. I think I would like to review a few more of those.
Well,
of course, we can only do two a month. We're not going at a very fast pace at this point, but...
Well, you're in luck. The first Godzilla was the only one where he doesn't fight another monster.
Yep.
From here on out, it's Godzilla versus someone.
Yep. Except for that American version. That came out in 2000, where they tried to make Godzilla more realistic. That did not work. 1998? Yeah, 1998.
Yeah,
There was like two movies. There's that one, and then they had a sequel, right?
No.
No?
No.
It's just the one movie. It's the one with the French commandos, right?
Yeah. I'm going to reserve my opinion on that one because I liked it when I was younger, but I've not watched it in a very long time. So I'm going to reserve my opinion on that until deeper review. I liked it more than others did, I guess, but
it seems like the Japanese and the Americans, we both view Godzilla very differently. So when you have an Americanized Godzilla movie, it's just so different. And the Japanese have a very different vision for it. With the Americans, we want it to be like a dinosaur monster movie. And the Japanese just want they want the more traditional looking Godzilla who walks through miniatures and destroys things. But the Americans movies don't like miniatures. They don't like that. And I don't...
Oh, Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of great... There's some, but I think this is me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I really feel like some of the best miniatures are in the Godzilla franchise. The Japanese have just done so well with these tiny models, and it's not just the houses they built. There's like pieces inside that when they break apart a house, the way it crumbles and falls apart, it looks good. And I think the Americans, it just wasn't realistic enough for us. So people didn't like miniatures as much.
Well,
so you can only get away with a little bit here and there, but the Japanese,
they
just like going all out. Go ahead.
It's also hard to compare that because like the American versions, like earliest one is the 98 Godzilla, So don't know if it's really fair to compare the two when since I don't know, I guess it depends on what area you're talking about, because I guess again, it's been so long since I've watched 98 Godzilla. I don't know how much of it was, I can't say how much of it was CGI, how much of it was model work, but if you're trying to compare like the more modern examples, I don't know if that's a very fair representation since we're in a day and age where CGI is easier and cheaper to do as compared to making practical models.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a super fair comparison, but I also am not knowledgeable enough to really make a call on that, I feel.
And I am not as big of a fan of computer graphics as a lot of people are. That's probably one of the reasons why I kind of tuned out the last decade, because a lot of people love computer graphics. They're good in a lot of ways, but I feel like they're overused. A lot of times they make the whole scene computerized, and I think there's some things that are better analog when they're close up to have like something real. And these miniatures, they're obviously not real, you can tell, but the effort people put into them, I think that they're fascinating. It's like with claymation. Claymation is a really fascinating thing to watch because somebody really had to work hard on every single frame to make it work. And it just has like a look and feel that makes it special. These scenes with these giant cities and buildings and bridges and phone lines or power lines that melt with the heat, it's special in its own way. Yeah.
Well, kind of bring it back around on you. I don't know if you recall, but we talked about King Kong versus Godzilla. You know, they went with the guy in the monster suit route because they had originally planned to do claymation, but it was too hard and too expensive. So
Yeah, and they chose this route, which I'm really glad they did. I don't think the American film industry would have cared as much to do this kind of stuff. I'm glad that the Japanese did it because it's a good medium.
well, I mean, again, I don't know if we're comparing apples to apples here because you're kind of comparing, how they made movies in the 60s compared to how they make movies nowadays
Maybe, yeah.
or in like the 2000s.
Yeah.
You're,
Yeah, I think well, right. So modern movies today are basically all with CGI. They're all basically that with some live action here and there.
gross blanket statements being thrown around everywhere.
Why not? People can disagree. Not a big deal.
Remember like 10 minutes ago when you were trying to close this out?
Yeah. Let's just keep talking forever. Okay. Or not. Or we can close it out. Okay. Final.
I don't know.
Do you want to close it out? Final thought?
I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out how we got on that tangent. I mean, it was kind of related, but I don't know how it started.
Yeah. It's where I thought about Casablanca suddenly. It entered my head, and I thought, all right, 10 minutes about that.
I don't think we got from Casablanca to the models, but whatever. Okay, so
yeah, I think I
boy.
think the scientist sacrificing himself was a bit like Casablanca. Although he never really said like once, like, you're a good girl, I'm glad we're getting married. Like, there really wasn't much of a love triangle. It was more like he just was more interested in his research and didn't care as much about the whole relationship.
I would disagree. He definitely had affection towards her. I mean, he trusted her enough, he loved her enough that he was the one person he entrusted with the fact that he had invented the oxygen destroyer.
Yeah, I guess that's a sentimental thing to do for somebody. I don't know. Okay.
The one that's married is not the hopeless romantic in this group.
No, not. Okay. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe
I'm probably going to get in trouble based on what I just said.
Well, does your wife listen to these?
We'll find out. If I get in trouble, then we'll know.
I'd say I know mutual friend's wife said she does, so maybe it will get passed along.
Honestly, we talk so long, she probably won't even make it to the end, even if she does watch it. So we're completely safe. She'll turn it off and be like, okay, yeah, I'll just say that I listened to it.
And Jeff gets in trouble during the next time we all hang out together.
I won't get in trouble for another few months because we're recording this in October versus January. So it
won't come out till January.
I've got almost 4 months.
You got 4 months to live.
Yep. I got to get my list out. All the things that I want to do before being destroyed. All right. So you recommend this movie, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I recommend it. For all the film nerds out there, definitely watch the Japanese version. Super fun.
As long as you
It's
fun?
Okay. Fun? Did you not see the cities being destroyed? You call that fun? Okay, I'm gonna say this.
Talking about disaster movies.
Okay, there are some sad points, but it is kind of fun to see all of the explosions and the melting power lines. Some of it was fun, and I love the little tiny tanks. They're adorable as they drive up and shoot the monster.
How do we get flipped around here? Suddenly Jeff's like, I'm like, this movie's not fun, but it's good. And you're like, this movie's fun.
Yeah, all I know how to do is contradict myself. That's my only skill.
It's a magnificent that and being very, what's the word? I can't think of the word.
There is no word, BJ. You couldn't think of a word because there is no word.
Consistent.
Consistent? Oh.
The word is consistent. You are very consistent in contradicting yourself.
Yes.
Anyway, my brain's about as derailed as a train that got wrecked by John Monster. I've made that joke before.
Yeah, and picked up and chewed. Why would he chew the train? Like he steps on it and then picks it up and is like, this would be delicious, and then eats it.
He doesn't know what it is. He's a giant dinosaur thing. He's never encountered a train before. How is he supposed to know?
Yeah. So like a dog, he just like chews on things to just because. Yeah, I get that. You have just come up with Godzilla's true motivation. He's just going through chewing on things, figuring out what everything is. Yep.
Okay, are we gonna go on another tangent?
No,
Or
no,
are we
that's
gonna
it.
find like an end this abomination?
No, it's done.
Okay. So, what are we gonna watch next? We don't know. We had that one episode where we knew what we were gonna watch next, and ever since then we're clueless.
Yeah, we'll watch something. It'll be good.
Oh, what's something? I don't know. So, I guess it's my turn to ask you. Any final thoughts?
Nope.
Do I wait for an answer? Okay, good. We're gonna end this. Gonna end this before Jeff tangents again. So, anyway, I'm BJ. With me was Jeff. This was the Wandering Tangent podcast, and we'll see you next time.